So right, so we're going to jump back in here into this relation slips series that we've been in over these last 6 weeks. And it's been quite a journey we've been on. We're going to put up here on the slide the list of the messages we've done so far. And you just look through these different skills that we've been looking at in this series from God's Word. You know, what does it mean to have empathy so that people feel seen and heard with us? How do we forgive even when it hurts? How do we engage in really good conflict? How do we make sure our expectations aren't overloading our relationships? How do we learn to take off the mask and be vulnerable? And all of these are critical skills if we're going to have thriving relationships with people in our lives. And the stakes are really high. When we do these things, when we practice these things well, we develop really good and healthy, flourishing relationships together. But man, when we get these things wrong, that's when we have these relation slips that can so often happen in life. And so today we are winding up the series. We're finishing it up by looking at a final skill together. A lot of speakers and authors over the years have used a really helpful analogy when it comes to our relationships, which is kind of like each of the relationships we have with different people is kind of like a bank account. And when we practice things well, when we practice good relationships, it almost feels like we're putting deposits into the account. But then when we do things wrong and we mess up and we hurt each other, it's like we're withdrawing from the account. And so how can we ensure that we're depositing into our relationships rather than draining too much out of them? Another way to think about that is to use the analogy here of a bucket. I just grabbed one of the old crabby buckets from home. But if you imagine that each of the relationships we have, each of the people we relate to is like a bucket that we're either pouring into their lives or we're sucking out of their lives. And the skill that we're going to talk about today to wrap this series up is a skill that really helps us to pour into the lives of the people that we are in relationship with. And the skill that we're looking at today is encouragement. Encouragement. It's this beautiful and biblical way of pouring resilience and strength and hope and courage into the lives of other people. And the Bible calls all of us as followers of Jesus to encourage each other. For example, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, one of the earliest letters in our New Testament, says, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. So Paul, who wrote this letter, is saying to these people in this church, in this place called Thessalonica, hey, you're doing a good job with this, but keep going, keep pouring encouragement into each other. The letter to the Hebrews is the same. Hebrews 3, encourage one another daily so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. But what exactly does that mean? Like, what exactly does it mean to encourage? Well, the English word encourage, you may never have even clicked to this before, but our English word encourage is actually built off the word courage. So to encourage means to infuse or inject courage into the soul of another person. To discourage is to siphon off, is to withdraw courage from that person. So this biblical call to encourage each other is a call to infuse, to pour courage into the soul of another human being. And that's really the key idea that I want you to take away today. Infuse courage through words of encouragement. Infuse courage, pour courage into the heart and the soul of the people you relate to. Infuse courage through your words of encouragement. And that's really what we want to try and unpack and think about today. So how do we do that? How do we encourage, pour courage, infuse courage into another person? And I want us to look at a beautiful story. It's one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament involving one of my favorite characters. The story is found in 1 Samuel 23. It's only short. We're going to put the words up shortly on the screen, but you're welcome to follow in a Bible or on your app if you'd like to. And the character involved is a wonderful man by the name of Jonathan. Now, that's not JD, although he's a wonderful man as well, but it's the Bible character that he may well have been named after. Jonathan was the son of the very first king of Israel called King Saul. And sadly, King Saul was a hopeless king. He was a disobedient king to what God had said until ultimately God had to reject him as king and said, I'm not going to build a dynasty from you. I'm going to anoint and choose another king to reign. And that next king, this man after God's own heart, was the famous King David. And you may be here, this might be your very first time in church, you've never even looked at the Bible or thought about God that much, or you may be jumping online and joining this for the very first time, but chances are, even if you know hardly anything about the Bible, you've probably heard of David. The David and Goliath story, where he goes to battle against the great warrior, this giant warrior of the Philistines, is one of the best known stories of the Bible. But that story is a story that comes right after his anointing as the next king, that shows that he really was this man after God's heart and a man of faith. Jonathan then is the son of that first rejected king, King Saul. And all other things being equal, if his dad had been half decent, Jonathan would have been the second king of Israel. But because his dad was a loser and was rejected by God, it means Jonathan will never reign, and instead David will take the throne in his place. But the beautiful thing about Jonathan is he doesn't sulk, he doesn't mope, he doesn't try and take David out at the knees. In fact, he becomes David's greatest supporter. And he chooses to build a friendship with David and do everything he can to protect David and help him get to the throne when his father Saul passes away. And that's because Saul has also worked out that David is going to be this next king, the anointed one. And so Saul decides he is going to kill David. And David ends up in 1 Samuel going on the run as a fugitive for years. Possibly up to a decade, he is running from Saul and hiding, trying to stay alive. And the story we're going to look at today, 1 Samuel chapter 23, comes in this time when David is on the run for his life. Let me read it, and then I want to pull some principles out of it. So 1 Samuel 23, verse 14. David stayed in the wilderness strongholds and in the hills of the desert of Ziph. Day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. While David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. And then Jonathan went home, but David remained at Horesh. As we think about encouragement this morning, I want to extract 4 key insights, 4 principles about encouraging from this story and the way that Jonathan infuses courage into the life of David. The first principle is this: see it. See it. And what I mean by that is recognize the necessity of encouragement. Look around and just realize that so many of the people that you are in relationship with are in desperate need of encouragement. David is in desperate need here. He's been on the run for at least months, if not years at this moment, and he is living in fear. That's what verse 14 and 15 at the beginning of the story are highlighting for us. Verse 14 is kind of this general statement that he's been on the run, that Saul is hunting him. Verse 15 kind of specifies it, that once again, as this story begins, Saul's coming out to get him. And it's almost as though Jonathan recognizes instinctively that David is probably in a season of deep discouragement in his own soul right now. He sees what's going on. He recognizes the need in his friend. And so Jonathan chooses to act and step into the story. As we think about the people we're in relationship with, we may realize that too. It's possible that we know of friends right now who are hurting or struggling, facing huge challenges. They're in a really tough place at work or at home, And we know that actually they need encouragement. But I want to suggest today that it may well be that there's far more people in our relationship circles that are in desperate need of encouragement that we don't even recognize. And part of this is a reminder to us that we need to be aware of the hurts around us and the deep needs in many, many people that we're in relationship with. The truth is that a lot of people can be struggling in life and will never admit it. The truth is that many of us actually feel deeply insecure about various parts of our lives. Most of us who are parents are really insecure about our parenting. We really don't know what we're doing and we struggle along, and the thought that someone might step in and infuse some courage into us through words is so incredibly helpful. Many of us in our workplaces kind of feel like we don't always know exactly what we're doing. We're faking it till we make it. And we desperately love someone to pour encouragement into our souls. And friends, the first principle we come to as we learn from Jonathan here is just to see it, to recognize that the people in our lives, for many of them, their bucket has probably got much less courage and resilience and strength in it than we realize. And this is a call to see that, to recognize the necessity of how important encouragement really is. Infuse courage, friends, through our words of encouragement. And the first step in that is to just recognize that need, to see it. The second insight then is seize it. See it, and then seize it. In other words, take the opportunity, take the initiative to step in and breathe encouragement into someone else. The beautiful irony of the story is that King Saul is running around the countryside trying to get his hands on David because he wants to kill him, and Saul can't find him. Jonathan, meanwhile, heads straight out and can find him straight away. Jonathan has no problem. But notice Jonathan takes the initiative. He instinctively probably recognizes David's probably feeling pretty discouraged right now. And so he takes the initiative to leave the palace, to get up out of the comfortable place he's in, and actually go and find his friend. He takes the initiative to go meet with him. And as he goes, notice in verse 17, he speaks. He doesn't just go find David and pat him on the back. He actually opens his mouth and he speaks words into the life of his friend. My father-in-law, Roland Foreman, has a brilliant statement on this. He says this: unexpressed encouragement is no encouragement at all. Unexpressed encouragement is no encouragement at all. In other words, thinking an encouraging thought doesn't encourage someone, does it? You may think something encouraging, but unless you actually speak it or send a text or write a card and actually express that encouragement, the person would have no benefit from your thought. And the problem is we think encouraging thoughts so often and we never act on them. You may have walked through the door into church this morning, and just like pretty much every Sunday of the year, Bob Shaw is standing right there. And I wonder how many times we've walked past Bob and thought, what a wonderful man. He is faithfully there week after week, just welcoming us with a smile. Wonder how often you've come forward and been prayed for by our wonderful prayer team and thought, man, what a blessing they are to our church. How many times have you gone upstairs if you're a parent and gone and collected your kids and thought, what an amazing team of volunteers we have in our kids ministry? How often have you sat at work and listened to a colleague do a presentation and thought, bang on. They absolutely nailed it. Everything that we wanted them to share on our behalf, they got that right. How many times, whether you're an older adult and your parents are now seniors, whether you're a teenager or a young adult, how many times have we thought, you know what, there's been frustration and some stuff with my parents, but gee, I'm actually really thankful for mum and dad. How many times, though, friends, have we thought something encouraging and never shared it? How many times has some appreciation or thankfulness welled up in our hearts that we never actually passed on to that person? Because here's the reality, friends. If we don't say it, if we don't share it, if we don't text it, if we don't email it, if we don't write it, there's no courage being poured into that soul. Unexpressed encouragement is no encouragement at all. And so what Jonathan does here, he sees it, he recognizes the need, and then he seizes that. He takes the initiative to go to David and open his mouth and speak words of encouragement. And that's how you infuse courage. You see it, and then you seize it. And then thirdly, you say it. You actually say some words or write some words. You actually give encouragement. But here's the key. We need to speak empowering truth, not empty flattery. We need to speak empowering truth, not empty flattery. So you have a look at this text again, at the words that Jonathan says. We can put that up on the screen here. Verse 17. Don't be afraid, Jonathan says. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. What I want you to notice is what Jonathan says to David here is absolutely true. This is what God has promised, and all Jonathan is doing is going to David and reminding him of the truth. He's reassuring him that what God has promised, God is going to do in David's life. He's not blowing wind. He's not walking up to some random guy in Israel and say, you're going to be the next king, when that's absolute rubbish. But he's going to the next anointed king and saying, this is true, and even if your heart's wavering right now, even if you're feeling discouraged right now, even if you're sick of running right now, hang in there. God has promised, and God's going to see it through. So Jonathan here is speaking words of truth into his friend, and that's what infuses courage into him. The problem is when we choose to encourage, it's very easy to slip over from encouragement into flattery. What is flattery? Flattery is saying stuff to people that actually really isn't true. It's over-exaggerating what we want to share with them. And flattery, ultimately, friends, is lying. It's deceitful. Proverbs says this, Proverbs 26:28, a lying tongue hates those it hurts, and a flattering mouth works ruin. Now, the way Hebrew poetry works is two lines say the same thing. They're in parallel. And so a lying tongue and a flattering mouth are the same thing in this proverb. In other words, when we're tempted to flatter someone and say something because we want to encourage them, but it's really not true, when we flatter someone, we're essentially lying to them. I will always remember a moment in the States when Rochelle and I were living in the US many years ago before we had kids. I was training to be a pastor at seminary, and we had helped to plant a church there in our last year. And I preached a couple of times in this church. Just as this young budding preacher, I got the chance to preach a couple of times. At the end of my first sermon, I finished preaching and the service ended, and a woman came up to me down the front and said some words of encouragement to me about my sermon, which was very nice. Now, New Zealand culture, we don't do this too much. We kind of hold back on the encouragement. In the US, particularly in the South, we're in Texas, they gush. Like they gush all over you. So she gushed some lovely words of encouragement, which was fine. But then she went over the line. She says, in fact, I think that was the best sermon I've ever heard. Now, she was about my age now. I'm pretty sure she was in her 50s, although I try not to estimate the age of women because I don't do it very well. But anyway, she looked about in her 50s, so I'm calculating how many sermons she's heard in her lifetime, and I am pretty sure, I am absolutely sure, the sermon was okay, but it was not that good. So if that was the best sermon she'd ever heard in her life, she had really had a sad life. But then having said that, she then gushed even more, and she said, In fact, I think you are a better preacher than Chuck Swindoll. Now, for those of you who don't know who Chuck Swindoll is this amazing preacher and pastor and author that was ministering in the US for 50 or 60 years. He's now in his 90s, he's just retired, but he was the president of the seminary that I was training in at the time. He had pastored for 30 years. He had authored like dozens of Christian books. His books were all over Christian bookstores. He'd sold millions of books. He was an amazing Bible teacher. And that year, Christianity Today magazine had just named him one of the 10 best preachers of the 20th century. So this woman has come up to me and said, I love that sermon. It's the best sermon I've ever heard in my life, and you're a better preacher than Swindoll. And as a Kiwi boy, I thought, yeah, right. You remember the TUI billboard ads? Yeah, right. And here's the sad thing, friends. She was trying to infuse courage. She was trying to pour encouragement and strength and resilience into my soul. And she gave me nothing. And the reason is because she was giving me empty flattery instead of empowering truth. If she'd just said, that was a wonderful sermon and it ministered to my soul deeply, that would have been encouragement. That would have infused something into me. But because she went beyond that, there was nothing. There was not one deposit into my heart on that day. And so the problem, friends, is that we can go one of two ways. We can move into empty flattery and go so over the top with encouragement we don't infuse courage. Or we can choose to remain silent or give such a little whimpery bit of encouragement it does nothing. Oh yeah, that was pretty good. It was at least better than last time. Well, that's encouraging, isn't it? What's that, one drop? So how do we ensure that as we see it and then seize it and then say it, how do we make sure we say it in a way that actually does infuse courage? And what I've found over the years, the best way to do this, friends, is to be specific. Don't just give a general comment of encouragement, be specific. See, imagine how powerful this would be is if you're a parent and you've got little kids up in kids ministry. Imagine if you went up and you said something like this to one of the volunteers as you picked your child up. You said, hey, I just want you to know, when I came and picked my child up last week, I noticed you were over the other side of the room and one of the little kids was talking to you and you were down on one knee, looking them right in the eye and listening to them. And I just want you to know, I went away so thankful that we have volunteers in our kids ministry who care that much about a single child. See, how powerful is that? Because we've got specific now in our encouragement. Imagine if you were to send a text to your Connect group leader that just said, hey, you do a great job leading our group, but the way you led that discussion last week, you didn't just take one answer and move on to the next question. You invited more, you opened it up more, you asked more questions, and we went really deep because of the way you led that discussion. Thank you for leading our group like that. See, that's powerful. When we choose to get specific in our encouragement, that keeps us, that guards us from empty flattery, but it also, that infuses courage, that infuses strength and resilience, doesn't it? Imagine if at the office or at your workplace tomorrow, you walked up to that staff member you work with, may not even be a Christian or interested in spiritual things, but you said to them, I just want you to know what a joy it is to work with you. And I don't know if you know, but when you walk into our office, the whole temperature of the place lights up. You just bring contagious joy. And I don't know if anyone's ever said that to you, but thank you. Again, when we're specific with our encouragement, friends, that's what infuses courage into the souls of people. See it, recognize the need, seize it, take the initiative, say it, speak words of truth. And then finally, friends, source it. Source it. And what I mean by that is ground your encouragement in what you see God doing in that person's life. See, ultimately, God is actually at the center of this story, this little story of encouragement. God's at the heart of it. Because you notice in verse 18, at the end of this, the two of them make a covenant before the Lord. They renew their agreement and their commitment to each other. But before that, I love this comment in verse 16 that I've highlighted. Jonathan went to David at Horesh, and what did he do? He helped him find strength in God. See, ultimately what Jonathan is doing for his friend as he goes and he speaks words of encouragement, he takes the initiative, he speaks truth, he is infusing courage. He's helping David find his strength and his faith and his resilience once again in God. And that's actually what it's all about, friends. It's helping our friends, it's helping each other find strength in God again. It's renewing our hope. It's renewing our strength. It's renewing our faith. All of us are on this journey of life, this pilgrimage of life, this race that we are running. But it's hard and it's tiring. And all of us have seasons where we're just struggling. And the power of encouragement comes in as we spur each other on. That's what that second reading that I read at the beginning was saying. Remember this, Hebrews 3:13? Encourage one another daily so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. See, we live in this world that so easily trips us up and bumps us around and knocks us out of the race. And the writer to the Hebrews is saying, keep encouraging each other, keep infusing courage and resilience and hope and faith through the words that you share with people. Spur each other on, encourage each other. See it, seize it, say it, and then source it in God. And friends, we can even do this with people in our lives who don't know God, who aren't believers. We can say to that person at work who just brings this contagious joy, we can say to them, hey, I just want you to know that you when you walk into the room, that walk into the office, it just lights up. You lift all of us by your presence. And I love how that's how God created you, I believe. And it's such a blessing to the rest of us. And you've just subtly, in a beautiful, mellow kind of way, just sourced that encouragement even for that person in God. And we all need this, friends, from each other. I love the way, as we finish, I love the way two Christian psychologists write about the power of encouragement. A number of years ago now, Larry Crabb and Dan Allender, they wrote these words. A well-timed word has the power to urge a runner to finish the race, to rekindle hope when despair has set in, to spark a bit of warmth in an otherwise cold life, to renew confidence when problems have the upper hand. Christians are encouraged to encourage one another. We must learn to speak sincerely with positive impact. Let's infuse courage. Let's inject courage into each other's lives through our words of encouragement. See it, seize it, say it, and source it in God. So as we finish today, I want to do something quite practical with this. I want to invite you, if you'd like to, I'd like to invite you to take out a piece of paper, if you happen to have one handy, and a pen, or maybe pull out your phone and open up notes or some kind of app like that on your phone. And here's what I want to invite you to do. I want us to take a minute, and I want you to think about the relationships in your life, the people in your life, and all of the different circles and all of the different scenarios and places that you have relationships with people. And I want to invite you to just pray in this moment and say, God, who do I need to encourage this week? Who do I need to see the need and seize the opportunity and say some words and source that in you? Who are the empty buckets in my life right now? And I just want to give you a minute to just wait on the Lord. And I would love you to end up with a list of 3 or 6 or 8 people that you can take away today and find ways this week to infuse courage. So I'm just going to give you a minute with the Lord to come up with your list, and then I want to pray for us. You got your list? You have some names, some faces. Even if you haven't written them down, if you've got some people that the Lord's placed on your heart, then let's bring those people to the Lord, shall we? Father, we have the names of people, friends, work colleagues, acquaintances, family members, that we believe you've just placed in our hearts because they're empty buckets. And they need courage, they need resilience, they need strength, they need hope. Lord, would you empower us this week to be an army of encouragers who deeply deposit into the relationships in our lives. Would you help us to see the need, to seize the opportunity, to speak truth, and to source and ground that truth that we share in you. Help us to be encouragers and to spread your grace and your love through the words we speak this week, to infuse courage. We ask it for your glory. Amen.